All right, guys, what's up? It is Hat Goofy and Jstoobs on Geeks of the Week podcast. Say hey, Megan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode one, official episode one.
It's episode one. I know that last episode zero was a surprise for us because we didn't really mean to. It didn't need to be made, and we just kind of like get carried away with conversation. We literally had like a full like 30-minute conversation before we even hit record on this. So this is gonna be fun.
It's going to happen every time, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You know what? I'm here for it. That's why we created this. This is just an
Exactly.
outlet for it.
Exactly.
But super excited. We decided that just one episode wasn't enough to do a Marvel versus DC thing. Like this is a big subject, it's a big topic. So we actually decided to split this into three parts. That's my daughter screaming in the background. I hope you can't hear. But but we've officially decided to split this into three parts because there's a lot to go through. There's TV, there's comics, there's movies, there's just everything. So we have a fun, exciting show for you today. Megan, what are your expectations for just like our Marvel and DC, like, I guess, month? It almost seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be that close. I think I'm really looking forward to it. I've seen people give you this reaction too, and I get it all the time where people just, because I talk about Marvel content so frequently, people
Mm-hmm.
think that I am such a Marvel fangirl, and I'm very open about the fact that, especially like in the terms of comics, I got into Marvel comics way more than I did DC comics. But it wasn't because I actually hate the debate of like which one is better.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's just, yeah, I think that it's one of those things where like I started reading Marvel comics, and from that point, it's like a rabbit hole that you fall into,
Right,
and
right.
it's impossible to like kind of diversify into everything. So like I'm a big fan of Batman, and I've read a lot of Batman comics, but I it's so expansive, even just trying to like I follow the Panda Red. Everybody follows Panda Red.
Oh yeah,
Panda's
Panda
great.
Red's awesome. I love that
And when
guy.
he talks about like the difference between like the new 52 and like, the classic DC
Mhm.
continuity, Marvel has their own version of that too. They countless reboots for characters and
Yeah.
so many different characters to keep in mind. And even within primary continuities, like Flashpoint and all of these different, converging timelines. I'm like, I don't,
Flashpoint.
it's how can anybody keep up with it all? So I am a Marvel fan because I happen to know more about Marvel because I started reading Marvel first. But
Right,
they're
right.
both great, and I am looking forward to this because I want to get into all of my favorite parts of both sides.
Hmm.
And yeah, just more than anything else, just appreciate both sides of the spectrum.
Shut up. You're a Marvel fangirl and you know it.
I mean, yeah,
You know it.
yes,
I'm a Marvel
yes,
fanboy. You're just a Marvel fangirl. You don't
I
like
do.
DC. You're just on the MCU sack, is what the kids always
Exactly.
tell me in my comments. It's always through my comments. And
Oh yeah.
it, for me, it's the same as you. Like, it's Marvel comics was what I was introduced to. My uncle like slid a Daredevil comic because that's like his favorite like superhero. He slid that comic in front of me, and then ever since then, I was just like super into like Spider-Man and Luke Cage and, Fantastic Four before, Marvel decided they didn't know what to do with them. But I think the whole debate over like Marvel versus DC, it's just so weird because it's like, why do you have to choose? Like, they're all great characters. There's so many great stories on both sides. Like, there's
Yep.
really like I understand having like your preferences of like who you relate to more. Like me personally, I relate to Marvel more because I feel like they have characters and stories that feel more of like the real world. So therefore it's easier for me to
Yeah.
relate to, right? Like Spider-Man's my favorite character because he feels like the everyman. Like, and I feel like I'm that everyman, kind of like struggling with everyday life while trying to be a superhero, like, now dad and like, employee, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's just what I tend to relate to most. But it's fine to like also like delve into like DC because they tell like a different side of comics where like these characters are like essentially like gods trying to live
Yes.
human lives versus
Yeah.
like humans like pretty much like having powers and like going through the day to day. Like seeing Superman go through the day to day is interesting, but it's almost jarring when it comes because like when you compare it with Marvel, you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of like the Spider-Man thing. He has a wife and he has a kid and like he has like problems. Like you before the rebirth, you didn't really see Superman with problems like that. Like that was like the number one complaint was like, oh yeah, he's so powerful and like he's not relatable. But I feel like his storytelling gets a lot better when you like give him those everyday problems. And that's
Yeah.
like having a son, like arguing with Lois Lane over what to have for dinner. Like I like that type of stuff. And I feel like when I read DC stories like that, that's what really gets me into it. That's why I love Batman so much, because it's the whole Bat family dynamic, you know?
Exactly. No, and I do think that like DC really is more about like the mythic idea of storytelling and archetypical in a way. And I think that that's incredible. And as someone who's a huge fan of mythology, I love it about that. And I think that Marvel, I think that like I'm a big X-Men fan, and I think that what a lot of people like about Marvel Comics is the drama.
Yeah, it is the drama.
There's so much drama because it's a human relatable experience. And that's, you know, and both are good. I love a great, you know, and I'm a huge Daredevil stan, so I'm a little bit jealous that your first comic was Daredevil. But yeah, no, I mean,
Mark Miller run is crazy. It's so
my
good.
God, yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, like I often compare Batman and Daredevil, and it really truly is like a difference in like approaching a similar character, one in like a mythic, symbolic, archetypical way, and the other from a very grounded, you know, gritty kind of realistic manner.
Right.
And it's, you know, ultimately they end up being very similar, and they end up, both of them explore similar themes. But I think, you know, the ideology of Batman is surrounded in the weight of the symbol, which I don't think Daredevil really has that. And that's very much what DC is all about. Their heroes all have their symbols on their chests. And even though a lot of Marvel characters have it too, I feel like for DC, it's almost more like a brand, you know, like a physical, like a burning brand. That is something it's so ingrained in their character and the idea of the entirety of the DC monkier. So
yeah, you know what the funny thing is, like, that I've been realizing over my years of reading comics is like when people I've seen this word pop up so many times, and this is what I like to tell people, because then this would make you truly see like the difference in like tones and themes between Marvel and DC. Whenever someone describes like the Justice League, like just the Justice League as like a whole, like the team or just like those characters, I always see the word pop up, pantheon. Right, I always see like the pantheon of DC heroes, or like the pantheon of the Justice League or whatever. And pantheon is interesting because when you think of pantheon, you think of literal like new gods, like old gods like Zeus, you know, Poseidon, like all those things. And then like essentially you have Superman, who's essentially like the new Zeus or whatever. You have like Batman, who's, you can say, is like the god of wisdom. You can Flash is the new Hermes, and so on and so forth. You know, Wonder Woman is tied directly to those. But when you think of the Avengers, you just kind of think of like super people. You know, they're a team of like super people. But those teams of super people is like, it's almost like when you're watching those characters interact, like Hawkeye interact with like Wolverine, like everyone has like their own individual like kind of dynamic, and you kind of like tune into these stories to just kind of see like how these characters bounce off each other. That's literally how Marvel kind of like made each character make their bones, right? Because they took their most popular, like Spider-Man or Fantastic Four, and then they introduced new characters in their comics, and they like basically you really liked it because you got to see like Black Panther for the first time and how he interacts with the Fantastic Four. And that interaction is what made you pick up a Black Panther comic. And then in Spider-Man, like, you know, he and like Daredevil will interact. And then you're like, oh, wow, Daredevil's actually pretty cool. Maybe I should read some Daredevil comics or something like so. But when it comes to DC, you're literally watching like these uber powerful people. And I always remember this. I saw a video from the Justice League Unlimited TV show where the Flash is getting lunch at the Justice League Tower with Hawkgirl and Wonder Woman. And I was like, this guy can literally run back in time and like split the multiverse into a bunch of different fragments. And here he is literally eating like a burger at a lunch table, like he's in like high school or something with Wonder Woman, a daughter of a god. It's crazy. So,
well, and I mean, again, I'm not like I call myself a casual DC fan, because I don't, outside of the world of Batman, and Gotham, I guess in general, I don't know like a ton about it. But it's always struck me from the other media that not explicitly comics, that Marvel really embraces morally gray characters, and a lot, like, as someone who's really drawn to villains, like I think even just even casual fans of Marvel, I think, are able to name like characters like Magneto and Mystique that are just very, morally ambiguous is a compliment, I would say. But and I think that because of a lot of that very like what's the word that I'm looking for? Like mythic storytelling that DC gets into. It tends to, I feel like a lot more of the stories that I have experience with in DC is very much like the good versus the bad. You know, it's almost more like a Star Wars kind of epic quest of good versus evil, whereas by nature of Marvel being a bit more grounded, I think, and again, this is just very generally speaking, I'm sure that there are examples of that could disprove that this is true in every situation on both sides.
There are people typing right now.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, no, you know, well, there was this one storyline.
You have no idea. Click, clack, clack, clack.
Exactly. But I think especially for casual fans, that's just something that Marvel is more heavily associated with. You know, even insofar as characters like Deadpool, who is strictly an anti-hero and not even not really a villain at all, but
doesn't even try to be a hero. Just he's out for himself.
Like DC has like Harley Quinn, and I think, you know, Poison Ivy has recently been less and less considered a true villain, even though she is a straight up murderer. But
I don't even consider Mr. Freeze like all that much of a villain. Like and I mean, just doing what he can.
Yeah, and they're definitely like, but we never really see like, you know, I feel like I resonate a lot with these characters and the way that they're presented, and the ties that they have to the heroes as well, because I feel like you have X-Men that come from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants regularly, you know, like it's a regular thing for these characters to have these moral fluctuations in Marvel, which again, I'm sure happens in DC. I just think that it's more heavily associated with Marvel in general.
Absolutely.
By the public.
Absolutely. And let me say this, Flash is my favorite like DC character. Like he's my favorite DC hero. Like literally, like when it comes just pretty much like when superhero-dom all, like there's Spider-Man, then there's Flash. It's like in that order. And I hardly ever see like an evil Flash story. And when I do, I don't really like it that much. Like there was like a future Flash, like, oh yeah, in the future, like Barry's gonna become evil. I'm like, the fuck? Like like that just doesn't feel right. And then like the Flash TV show, which I stopped watching after season 4 because it just got weird and dumb and but they had like it's Savitar, and like not only a Savitar, like a speedster from like I think he's like from another time period or something, but then in the show he's like literally a giant robot speedster who's like, yeah, I'm the god of speed, da, 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 da. But then apparently the robot is a suit, and in the suit is Barry Allen. And he's like, yeah, I'm evil, like, because I got a scar. I'm like, what the fuck is it? It just doesn't feel right. And, you know, so I don't know if that's like mandated where it's like, oh, yeah, you know, like we have morally ambiguous characters, but when we have our heroes, they're heroes. When we have our villains, they're villains. And then when we have like characters, like you said, Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, I even put like, I think it's a Swamp Thing. Man Thing is the Marvel one. But even Swamp Thing, like he's like a very off to the side figure who's like in the same vein as like Poison Ivy. He's just not as good looking. You know, he does the same thing as Poison Ivy does, just not as good looking. But would you like to hear like a controversial topic from a Marvel fanboy?
Always.
I think when it comes to like comics, DC has been killing Marvel in the last like 10 years. Killing Marvel in the last 10 years. Like it's not even a contest, because you said it yourself. Like Marvel has like, and I don't know if it was because of the Avengers, but lately Marvel has been doing like these reset events like every like 2 years. Yep. And like as somebody who's like been reading comics for a while, I feel that's very frustrating for casuals to get into, because it's always restarting, it's always doing this, it's always 1 minute it's Battle World, and you know, then you have like Secret Invasion, everything's reset, then there's like a Siege, which curated the heroic age or the new heroic age or whatever. But DC literally was like, let's try something new 52. They realized people didn't like that, then they said, okay, Rebirth, let's just like let's just take what's good, just scratch all of it, let's just take what you liked from the new 52 and let's get everything back to like what it was, like what you're used to. And like I read those Rebirth stories and they're freaking fantastic.
Well, like, and honestly, like Marvel could use something like that. And I think that a lot of the like big crossover events from like the early 2000s and even the 2000 teens are like still very beloved, but they are incredibly confusing and convoluted. Much, and sometimes even like self-contradictory. Like you have like Civil War and then like Secret Invasion, like literally you have these events that just keep, oh, well, this happened, but actually this happened. Same thing with Scarlet Witch's backstory getting retconned. I mean, they have they've had all of these massive events where they just keep going back and making changes. And I do think that Marvel could benefit. And I know that like some of their more recent comics, like the new Hickman run for X-Men.
Oh yeah, Hickman is amazing.
And they've just said, hey, this is just a good starting point. Like, don't even worry about what came before, which I mean is always appreciated for new readers and new fans.
Right.
But it does seem like DC really, because I mean, I appreciate that the New 52 did not go over well and had its own set of controversies, but I appreciate that they said, hey, we've been making comics for 50 years and it's kind of hard for people to keep up with that. Right. So let's
give them starting point. Just
exactly. And I also respect that they realized, okay, we fucked up.
That takes a lot to say. That takes a lot, like to be like, okay, that wasn't the best idea.
I remember when the New 52 came out, the Starfire controversy, because they also had the graphic scene between Catwoman and Batman on the roof. I think was one of the first episodes, and the cover I think of that issue was notorious because Catwoman was twisted in such a way that you could see her cleavage and her ass in the same.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like such a peak moment for comics. It's like, maybe we should consider what we're doing.
That was very conflicting for me because on the one hand, like I'm a man and like like I'm not even gonna front. I was just kind of like, ooh, but then I was like, wait, like I feel like so like low-key ashamed that like my man side came out first, then like my feminine side was like, but still, that's kind of fucked up. Like,
what is that? The Esching staircase or something? The one that's impossible. It's like the one from Inception. I have to use Google now.
Yes, I know that. I know. I can see the photo in my head for sure. Yeah, I don't know what the name of it, but I know I've seen that photo before, where it's like Escher you're always going up, but you're always going down or something. It's like in a like a square.
It's something that only works in concept. You couldn't build it in reality.
Right.
But I'm going to be using Google because last week I accidentally accredited the first half of Brave to Jennifer Lee when it was actually Brenda Chapman. No.
All those comments.
I know. And now we've already started a movement with the release the Jennifer Lee cut. And
I know, right? And it doesn't even exist. That's a cut that doesn't exist.
We're creating our own what is the Mandela effect right now?
Yes, exactly. You know, I'm fine with saying like the Jennifer Lee cut because that would just prove how ridiculous this like fan like fan demanding of like content works. Like I can't stand it. So I'm glad we're doing that to teach a lesson. It was an accident.
Exactly. We did it on purpose, and hopefully now you know better.
We're owning that. That happened on purpose. So you're welcome. I hope you learned something.
Life lessons from Megan and Juju.
That's a whole nother podcast right there. We should make it ASMR too. Just like just life lessons, just like this.
Very calming, very important.
but like it's so like that, like exactly. But like, please look it up because now I really want to know the name of it, like the Escher staircase or whatever. And I can see people just typing like it's not that.
MC Escher is him.
MC Escher. Okay. So like seeing that comic, like not only did it remind me of like the Spider-Woman comic where she's like on the wall and it's like very similar to that. But I was just kind of like, damn, like I hate being a man in this world because like I have like the impulses of seeing like I love a good Catwoman costume, but then I'm just kind of like, maybe we should change that to something more practical. Like it doesn't make sense. Like, but I love comics when they like address issues like that. Like I've been telling people before Civil War II, which don't read it. But before Civil War II, and the Captain Marvel movie, which we can get into later, I was a huge fan of Carol Danvers as a character. She was my favorite superheroine. Like I was rocking with her since like the Miss Marvel, like binary days. Like I was into it. And so like I remember reading a comic and I just love her friendship with like Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman. Like I think it's one of the best friendships in all of comics. And there's a scene where like she's talking to Spider-Woman about getting a new costume. And like, you know, obviously like Spider-Woman has a skin tight, like very like suggestive costume, leaves nothing to the imagination. and they're just hanging out. They're just really hanging out. And like Captain Marvel was like, hey, you should get a new costume. Now's your time to get a new costume, because I think at that point she's been away for a minute, and then she's like, I don't know. She's like, come on, let me help you get a new costume. Let's do it. She's like, fine, like But just remember, you literally like fought crime with your cheeks hanging out. Like, and she's like, but I don't anymore. And so that's why you need a new costume. And it was just such a great moment and such a great recognition of like where comics was and like where it's going now, especially like between that was like probably the best example of like the Bechdel test that I've seen in comics.
You know, and it's true because I've had this conversation as a longtime comics fan so many times, and I'm also an artist, and I primarily have always drawn women, and particularly like the female form. And so I would have conversations like this with a lot of people about like how the male gaze plays into comics and whether or not it's a conversation that is like necessary, because you know, I think as an artist it's very tempting to want to draw idealized forms all the time, right. And then also, you know, like the male characters in comics are idealized versions of the male characters. I do think that there's a lot of instances where I'm reading comics where it's very noticeable. Like I can't remember which run I was reading, but X-23, it was an X Factor run, but X-23 was all of the characters were like about to have an ambush, and like they show several panels of like the characters looking from the bushes, and when they show X-23, it's a shot from behind her as she's laying on her stomach on the grass, like right behind her ass. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, okay. I mean, there's just so many instances like that where it's just like, I do think that like, yes, there are both men and women in comics are a bit, you could say, objectified. I think that it's, you know, a better word that I like to use is idealized, but some of the like Power Girl's costume is a really good example to me. And I'm just like,
and they've made that into a running joke at this point. It's a straight running joke. Power Girl's
like, what? How can you get it like her? That's where the logo would normally go, and instead it's just cleavage.
Her logo is cleavage.
It's just her boobs.
Literally nothing but boobs. And like it's oh my god. Like now we're talking about Power Girl. Like when I was a young immature boy, Power Girl was also like one of my favorite heroes. Like for obvious reasons. But like I just now, and when I got older though, I just hated the fact that like she is such a great character. She's a great character. Like I like her relationship with like Harley Quinn, and I just love how like she bounces off of Superman, how like she's a different type of like superhero. And I like how like she knows that she's like very attractive, but like she doesn't use it to her advantage. She just kind of like she said, like there's a comic where she saves a guy and the guy's like looking at her and she's like, hey, like calm yourself. So like I like that. But then like on the other hand, like it's just the writing around the cleavage window. I'm like, the time you could spend just like focusing on the cleavage window, you could spend coming up with something to cover it up, or coming up with like a logo. You know, like there's one instance where I think like they try to explain it by her saying like, oh, when I first became a hero, I thought like maybe I could wear an S on my chest like Superman or something like that, but I just never found a logo. It's just a hole, and I don't think I'll ever fill it up. And I'm like, that's your explanation for cleavage? Like that was the weirdest explanation to sexualize or idealize a character that I've ever seen. It's just like, oh, so she's missing something. It's like saying she's a monster.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that there's so many like I get this justification too when I talk about Star Wars sexualization of the female characters. Like Twi'leks are heavily sexualized. And I know you're not the biggest Star Wars fan, but you know the Twi'leks are the aliens. Yeah. I'm Twi'leks they're always sexualized. And Ayla Secura is a Jedi who is a Twi'lek, and she is one of the only Jedi that like wears a crop top and like low-rise pants. And they're fans always say Twi'leks. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking this up right now.
I think some people call them Twi'leks too, but I've always pronounced it as Twi'lek.
Oh yeah, I've seen these before.
Yeah. But the argument is, their entire race is heavily sexualized, and they're, you know, involved. Yeah. If you look up, Google, fans like to sexualize them too.
This is some Starfire level shit.
Yeah. But the writers came up with a whole story that's like, oh, well, she's embracing her sexuality and she's using it as a statement to combat the stigmas that are associated with her people. And I'm like, look, that's all well and good and empowerment and all of that. But when it comes down to it, it's male writers writing a story to justify drawing the character in an overly sexualized way.
That is so sus.
And and I'm just like, so I want to, and same thing with like cosplayers. Like, I used to cosplay, exactly. Like, if someone wants to embrace their sexuality, embrace their body, that is awesome. But I just takes like slight issue with like fictional characters that are given motivations
from a man's mind.
Exactly. And they're able to write, a clever, this is all of the very smart and intellectual justifications that I have given the character for why we're going to, heavily objectify her in the panels. But and it's getting better. Honestly, this is all of this that we're discussing. Like, costumes have been evolving for a while, and in both DC and Marvel, it's really getting to a point where a character can be sexy, but they're not necessarily like, it's not a what do you call it? It's not like a centerfold. The panels seldom look like centerfolds anymore. So
right, exactly. They're splash pages now, where like people do like these awkward like poses. Like remember the Avengers poster, the very first one, and it had like all the Avengers like in the city like posing. But for some reason, I'm realizing I'm hating this pose, like just period, like the different variations of it. But this one specifically, where like Black Widow is like facing like it's the back of her, and her legs are like super spread out, and her butt's just like, you could tell somebody spent time like touching up her butt, and she's like shooting like this, and I'm like, no one fights like this. Like, what kind of like
she's like a Greek god. She's like
like, who did like, I want to know, was that like an effective hit? Like, I'm pretty sure she missed whoever she was going for. But I just really hate poses like that. I was also looking at a Percy Jackson like poster the other day, and like Brandon T. Jackson's character, I can't even remember, he's like the centaur or whatever, or the phone, or I don't know, he's like literally his back is like turned, and he's just like, I'm like, who looks at things like that? Like, who's like, why are you facing the other way? So I just really like hate that pose, but I hate it especially when like it's used to like sexualize a character, because it's like all the other characters are like in battle stance, and it's like, hey, let me turn all the way around, show my butt, and like,
and to be fair, Marvel has gotten really comfortable sexualizing their male characters too.
Equal folks, equal strokes for equal folks.
Exactly. And as long as it's done respectfully, I mean, like, everybody, people are going to appreciate Chris Hemsworth without a shirt on. America's ass should be on display every now and then.
Hey, I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it at all. If anything, like that, like I was like, damn, I now know how women feel when like they see like these like characters like on screen or on the page. But then I was thinking to myself, like, that makes me like really want to hit the gym like hard. Like, I really want, like, after looking at Chris Hemsworth, like his body is unreal. Like, Did you ever watch the movie Crazy Stupid Love?
Yes.
Remember when Ryan Gosling like takes off his shirt and like Emma Stone?
I have not ever forgotten that moment in my entire life. No, that's permanently him. Ryan Gosling is one of my
unforgettable
lovely people that I really love.
Trust me, neither have I. Because when Emma Stone says like, come on, it's like you're photoshopped. Yes. Like that's exactly, like, I was looking at his body and I was like, okay, I wouldn't say Photoshop, but it's definitely like nice. But Chris Hemsworth is photoshopped. He looks like an action figure. You know those action figures with the top heavy like things? Yeah. He looks like that, but it doesn't look weird.
Chris Hemsworth and his wife, Eliza
Padecki, I believe.
Padecki. They are both like, both of them. I can't, and they have children. Like,
oh my gosh,
unfair. The gorgeousness that's being unleashed upon the world from their union. And just, I can't even look at them on a screen and not be intimidated. I'm just like, oh my God.
Here's the thing, because like Elsa Pataki, that's what it was. Pataki.
Pataki.
But here's the thing. Like, I remember seeing that woman on Fast and the Furious. She had a very small role in Fast and the Furious. I love Fast. She had a very small role. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is probably the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Like, this is crazy.
She's so stunning.
And she gets no screen time. So I remember for the whole movie, I'm like, bring her back. Like, where is she? Like, bring her back. And then like, I remember finding out, like, to me, it was like big news. It was like, Chris Hemsworth is married to this woman. And then you find out they have kids. And I'm like, wait a minute. Beautiful people just seem to like come together.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my! And they're both like,
And it
I think,
happens in Australia. They're Australian, and
Australian. I have a thing for Australians.
I mean,
Like,
Australia
I
is.
really do.
I've never been, and I am starting to believe that it's literally a made up mythical place where,
It's the
like,
mascara.
yeah,
Not the mascara.
yeah, like people. There's just too many perfect Australians. They need to maybe cool it with because they're really putting the rest of us to shame.
You know what I think the deal with Australia is that like since it is basically like when you look at Australia on the map, it's literally like just like a rock. It's like a rock in the middle of the ocean, right? So basically the mascara. But I think what happens is it's almost like every citizen of Australia are like diamonds, right? They're cooked.
Yeah.
They're cooked literally because it's hot as shit over there. It's Christmas during I believe it's Christmas during the summertime. they're cooked over there. And there's things trying to kill them, and it's like the survival of the fittest.
No,
so
it's
like
true.
so with the weather, with the deadliest animals on the planet, with just like everything happening, they just learn to adapt because they just
Australia really said Darwinism, and Australians said bet. Like we're gonna okay, we don't worry.
I can't remember who I was listening to, but they said Margot Robbie. It was Margot Robbie.
Another Australian.
Harley Quinn. We're still on topic. Marvel versus DC.
Yeah, we promise Marvel and DC is coming back.
But I need to get this Margot Robbie thing off. She was telling a story. I believe it was to Jimmy Kimmel, and she was just casually telling the story of like how like she was doing something in her bedroom, and she heard her mom like screaming, like, "Hey, Margot, come here!" And she's like, "Hey, mom, I'm doing something." She's like, "Margot, come here now." She's like, "Mom, I'm doing something," and she legit finished what she was doing, and she went out. And she saw that her mom was being like either constricted or like a snake was on her, like just a snake. And like Jimmy was like, "Well, why didn't you do anything?" She's like, "Mom could have just used a pushing stick." And then he was like, "There's a pushing stick for snakes? Like you guys, like you have that?" Oh my gosh.
I don't know that I ever need to go to Australia. It looks beautiful.
I am, and that's the thing. Only the deserving can go to Australia. Like that's why the beautiful people are there.
Yeah, I think I'm built different, and by that I mean I'm kind of a little bitch. So I'm not sure that I can.
I love how you called yourself a bitch when we literally there's little like death traps. Like it's a death. There's literally animals, the most deadliest animals, and you're like, I'm a bitch because I don't want to get poisoned by anything in my house.
Australians are tough. They just they're like, no, I might die, but I'm gonna go for a hike. I'm scared. Koalas will attack you. Like
koalas are not nice.
I don't know that there's anything on that continent that is like you could consider a friendly, but
have you seen like wet koalas?
No, are they scary? That sounds scary.
You do not want to see a wet koala. Like
I'm picturing a gremlin. It's
like gremlin level type stuff, like a wet gremlin with fur. Like it's pretty. It's like, you know what? Remember the Furbies where people would like take the fur and whatnot off the Furby, so it's just like kind of like the robotic eyes. It
like
looks
Hank
like
Green's baked bean Furby.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
It's so terrifying.
It's so scary. It's like nightmare fuel. So like, and that's a koala. That's what koalas look like when they're wet. I'm like,
no, thank you.
Holy shit. I've learned a lot about koalas.
Speaking of nightmare fuel, let's bring it back to Marvel versus DC.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say I don't know. I think DC has scarier villains. I know that like Marvel has really terrifying villains, but like DC villains give me like literal nightmares. Like Scarecrow specifically from the Arkham Asylum game, that version of Scarecrow.
I haven't played, but I've seen clips.
Literally still haunts my dreams.
Yeah.
Like, every villain from that, like the Joker from those games too, is also just like, I mean, every Joker is terrifying, but like,
that one specifically is like, he's on another level of like,
it's so shit. And like the whole premise is that like he gives you like this gas that like induces your greatest fears as well. So it's like on a meta level, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and Scarecrow is the embodiment of fear.
Right. I mean, even when you think about like not even like going outside of like, because we can go all day on scary Batman villains. Like obviously you have like Victor Zsasz, who's literally a serial killer who cuts himself every time he kills someone, and I think he has like thousands and thousands of cuts, which is insane. I think the serial killer with the highest body count may be like 30 or something like that. So it's like, so I don't study serial killers, so somebody can like let me know about that. But again, you have like those Batman villains, but then like even when you go to the Green Lantern like villains, like Sinestro's kind of a scary dude. Like when he goes like full evil and he like has the fear-inducing yellow lanterns, because their whole thing is like fear. And then like you have like Parallax, who like is like this like, do you know about Parallax by chance?
I mean, I'm like, I've got a cursory familiarity with a lot of this
Okay.
stuff, but I usually, it's like, I read a lot of Wikipedia entries and stuff like this. So
Okay.
I'll see names brought up, but I haven't read a lot of actual stories that have these characters in them.
Because I remember you said you were a casual, and I need to like you to understand like Parallax is like an entity. So like through like the Green Lantern like mythos, and this is like fairly new. Jeff Johns just like recently like fleshed it out in like 2011 or something. But apparently, like there's like, you know how like there's the willpower, there's rage, there's fear. Each entity, each like I guess like thing on the emotional spectrum has like an entity, right? And I believe like there's a blue one that's like a whale, that's like hope or whatever. But Parallax is the entity for fear. In the fucking awful Green Lantern movie, they just made him like a giant poop monster that like floats in space and shit. That's not Parallax. Parallax is almost like, remember like in Men in Black, there was like the giant roach like guy. He looks like that if that was possessed by a demon.
Oh,
and like yellow, and like not only that, he possesses other people. Like he possesses people. So like the whole like Green Lantern like Emerald Twilight like storyline where Hal Jordan just goes fucking nuts and becomes a villain and kills like all the Green Lanterns or whatever. It was revealed that he was possessed by Parallax, and Parallax, like when you look at Hal Jordan, he looked like Freddy Krueger had gotten to his body, and he had like these weird, it was exactly like it was like he turned into it for a minute. He had like multiple eyes, his teeth came out. It was just he possessed the Flash. Look up Parallax possesses Flash. Look it up right now and tell me that
right now.
Just Parallax and like Sinestro and the whole like Yellow Lantern Corps, just scary individuals. They have the anti-monitor and shit. It's all there's also like the Red Lanterns, who are also super scary, like Atrocitus.
My God. Yeah, this. I just saw. Yep, nope. He looks like a cockroach. I don't like that.
I'm posting a picture on the YouTube video right now. This is the picture, guys. This is the picture.
Oh God,
it's terrifying. So like, and that's just green, and that's just like an inkling of some of like the terrifying like bad guys in the Green Lantern like mythos. It's insane. So like,
I think that I mean, and from the little that I've learned more about like Darkseid and stuff recently. I mean, there are just some, and I think also it is like we were talking about the mythos earlier too. Like they're the idea of like evil entities that come from mythos are just as like heavy of a concept as like the light side of mythos. I think that DC has these like really built up characters that are like this just idealized form of a like Superman, you know, like what everybody wants a hero to be, the best version of the best person. And I feel like a lot of their villains are like that way, but the opposite, where it's just like, this is the most terrifying, like just purely evil shit.
If you go super light, you got to go super dark.
Exactly.
And they go dark.
They really do.
Oh, Jesus.
And I like Marvel villains too. Like I really, I'm a big fan of complex villains. So like, I really like Magneto. I think everybody's a
fan of Magneto.
Yeah, he's awesome. But Marvel has a lot of fun with their villains too. I think even the villains that are just straight evil are still like, I'm generally not ever scared of them. Sometimes they're even amusing too, you know?
Yeah, like Carnage is supposed to be like the scariest of the scare, but I'm not really scared of Carnage as like if I would like when I first started reading Carnage, like in his like first run, like the Let There Be Carnage, like whatever story, I can't remember the name right now. But the thought of like a serial killer who gets like the hold of like the symbiote, it's scary because like I believe like he looks through a phone book and then just starts murdering people like at random because he just felt like it. And that's like a scary concept. But now it just seems like he's just, you know, like I don't want to say like a nuisance, but he just seems very like over the top. Like when you really think about it, like he's not as scary as like he once was. Same thing with Venom. Like now Venom's like on that like anti-hero like kind of like thing. And he eats people's heads. But even like when you watch the new movie, there's not really like a fear factor. Like I saw him bite like 5 heads in that movie, and every time, like I don't know if it was because it wasn't rated R, but I was just like, Okay, yeah, Venom bites heads. That's like kind of what he does.
I mean, like, yeah, and I mean, like Thanos, for example, like Thanos in the comics, yeah, he's terrifying, but his motivation is because he wants to get in Death's pants,
Yeah.
like.
Oh yeah.
And I prefer that. I prefer comics Thanos to MCU Thanos, but I just and I don't think that takes away from it at all. I think that it's still
Right.
like Marvel. I think has always just had like a sense of humor about a lot of this
Right.
stuff,
Right.
and it's not that one is better. It's not that one is a better approach. I just think that there a lot of times I notice these stark differences. Even characters like Galactus, it's like, yeah, he's objectively, the idea is terrifying, but
Yeah.
nobody's having nightmares about Galactus. You know what I mean?
Hey, wait. I'll tell you this. I still have nightmares about Galactus. Like,
What?
I still have nightmares. Let me tell you why. Like, Galactus to me is like the scariest, not in concept, but just like as a character, is like the scariest shit. Like, I can
Like existentially.
Like existentially, yeah. Like here's the thing. I have a problem with things. I have like an irrational fear of things that are bigger than what they're supposed to be. Like,
okay, yeah.
Like I'm just inherently afraid of things that could potentially eat me by accident. Like I have a,
that is a very specific fear.
It's
and
a
I
very
love
specific fear. It came from whales. Like when I was little, like I watched The Page Master, and the Moby Dick scene.
Amazing.
The Moby Dick scene where the fucking know. From the bottom of the water, like he comes and he fucking almost eats them. Monstro from Pinocchio will fuck you up. I recently watched Pinocchio. He will fuck you up, right?
Yeah. No, that scene is legitimately terrifying.
Terrifying. The fact that he had his eyes are like here, but his mouth is like right here, and he's just evil. He's an evil whale. And
frankly, all of Pinocchio is just nightmare fuel.
Pinocchio is just nightmare fuel. Like the donkey scene.
Jesus. Oh my god. Yeah.
Okay, but then this solidified it. It was a scene in Finding Nemo, and yes, that was a nice whale. It was a nice whale, but it was just
never trust him.
It was just the direction. Like you have Nemo and not Nemo. You have Marlin and Dory just chilling right here talking about whatever, and then you have the whale come from behind, and it's invisible at first, but then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And like I know we're not as big as fish, but I felt like a fish, and I was like, the fact that something that lives on this planet in a space that we know nothing about. And that's not our element, and it could just swim by, open its mouth, and swallow me. That terrifies me. I
can respect that.
Yeah, there was this horse when I worked at Disneyland that terrified me because those horses are fucking huge. Like they were like, I don't know if you've seen those horses, but I would literally like turn away whenever those horses would go by. So Galactus. The fact that he literally like sometimes appears as if he's walking around space.
Yeah.
like the fact that there could be something walking around space, just like we don't know it, just like coming towards our planet to fucking eat it. That scares me. And so and he always just it's this face, it's his eyes. Like he never smiles. He's never even angry. He's just, I eat. Just like
yeah. No, I totally feel you. I mean, like I developed a fear of forever when I was a child because existentialism freaked me out a lot. And like the meaning of life was very difficult for a 7-year-old to contemplate. So I understand those like really like, this is a big picture kind of fear.
Yeah.
But like on the page, I just feel like so more often of the time. I mean, like if you look at like Batman is a great example, especially because Batman movies have gone through so many different versions and like, interpretations of the character. Right. But every single Batman movie, like no matter who is in charge, except for maybe objectively Joel Schumacher, like the villains are scary. They're like Tim Burton's Batman villains, like his Penguin. Oh my god! Like Penguin. Yeah, just And so
did he have like black blood or some shit? Was that his blood?
Well, yeah, because he's like a mutant of some kind, and he's like literally got like flippers for hands.
Never forgot that.
He's like vaguely like the movie alludes that like he could survive underwater, maybe. Like I don't know if he breathes water, but it's very much like I think the idea is he got thrown into a river as a baby, and there was like radioactive chemical waste in the river, and so it like mutated his body into some kind of way.
Ugh.
But he was
Nightmare.
born with the flipper hands, so I don't know if that's related at all. But
Fucking gross. Like just
yeah,
seeing his dead body like float like in the water just like creeps me out.
seriously, it was so disgusting and terrifying. But yeah,
That's crazy.
but yeah,
I mean,
I think that yeah, I know I've been doing this big MCU rewatch, and I love a lot of the problem with the MCU villains is that they are pretty one note. But even the
they've
ones
gotten
that
better.
yeah. But even the ones that are well developed, it's not trying to be terrifying. It's not a horror movie, you know, it's not something like that. And again, so the comparison isn't like one is better than the other. I just think that these are differences that some people prefer one and some people prefer the other. And there doesn't even have to be a hard and fast rule that like, oh, every time I like a villain that's like this more than like this. I think that those conversations can be so reductive, you know, which is some of my favorite DC movies are really dark. Some of my favorite Marvel movies are really funny. I don't think that necessarily that makes either one inherently better. I think a good movie is a good movie, you know?
You know, when we get into, we should then, I think that's a perfect segue to like actually get into our list of like our top 5 favorite Marvel and top 5 favorite DC films.
Yes.
Do you have your list ready? I got mine.
You start us off.
Okay, because like it's funny that you say like some of my favorite Marvel movies are funny, some are dark. Like one of like I think like the best superhero movie of all time is very fucking dark. It's pretty damn dark, and I love it. So I'm
the same one.
Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna start with Marvel, and it's in this order. It's in this order. From one, I'm gonna go from 5 to 1.
Okay.
So number 5. X-Men, and I'm this could change like tomorrow because like I always fight between these two, but it's an X-Men film, and it's right now I would say X-Men 2, X-Men United with Nightcrawler. That fucking scene is amazing. Like it has the best way of tackling like its themes of like prejudice and you know the whole like I think it best adapts like the whole like reason behind like the creation of the X-Men is just like the marginalized group that's trying to defend the Earth that like fears it, and the fact that you have the Brotherhood banding together with the X-Men in order to fight this like threat of oppression. Love it. I think Days of Future Past like does and Days of Future Past would have been it, but that's why I put them together. So it could change right now, it could change tomorrow, but X2 is my number 5. Then for number 4, I have Avengers Infinity War. Because I don't care what anybody says, that and Avenger, like when you put that up against Avengers Endgame, it's way more rewatchable. It's way more enjoyable. It's a lot more like the scale of that film is amazing because like you're going from Wakanda, then you have like Thor hanging out with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and then like it's also like film from the then you're also in like Budapest. I think you're in like Germany at one point, or they were in like Scotland at one point.
Infinity War, yeah, the Vision and Wanda in Scotland at the beginning of Infinity War.
Right, so it's this like literal like universe spanning like tale that's anchored by the villain, which is like it's an incredible introduction to like a well-known like villain. But let's be real, like Thanos is cool in the comics, like he's really really cool in the comics. I think this film like put him on like the stage of like greatest like villains in Marvel like history. So yeah, Infinity War definitely gets my vote on that. Plus there's just so many, the Thor and Wakanda scene, like oh my god, it's amazing. I still get goosebumps just thinking about it.
That scene is so iconic.
Oh, just over here like shaking, like I'm thinking about it right now. Okay, and this is probably where it's gonna get controversial. Like my number 3, because when you hear my number 2, people are gonna be like, well, especially if you hear my number 2, because I know how you feel. But my number 3 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is my number 3 Marvel film of all time. Obviously, like animation on point. Miles Morales, great character. Everyone's a great character in it. Miles Morales, like Aaron Davis, like you name it. The music, the soundtrack. I've been listening to that soundtrack ever since that film came out. Like it's my workout soundtrack at this point. So yeah, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That's my number 3. And then my number 2 is also a Spider-Man film. And I'm gonna just say the real Spider-Man fans know what I'm gonna say. Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is probably the best superhero sequel like ever of all time. I don't care what people Tobey Maguire looks too old. every high schooler looked old in those movies during that time. Everyone.
It's true.
Like,
you watch
everyone.
Grease. I mean, they're literally a bunch of 30-year-olds.
They're literally 30-year-olds. Like,
yeah.
the freaking girl in High School Musical, what's her name? Monique
Vanessa
Coleman.
Hudgens.
Not Vanessa Hudgens, but Monique Coleman, who played I can't even remember her name, but it was the black girl. She was like 25 when she was I think they were juniors. She was a 25-year-old junior. And don't even give me
Spider-Man Homecoming. Laura Hanier, I think is her name. That gorgeous actress that played Spider-Man's first crush. She was like 26 or something, I think, in that movie.
You see what I'm saying? They're still doing it. They're still doing it. So don't ever come at me with the Tobey Maguire was too old for it. He didn't look too old, okay? He looked like a wimp, and I'm cool with it. But I can go on about it, but I'm gonna keep this like really short. Spider-Man 2 has like the best like it reminded me of the golden age of like superhero storytelling. And I'm talking like the Richard Donner, like Superman, like dichotomy of like, oh, there's a superhero who could do these like amazing things, but he comes home and he has like this super shitty apartment. He can't pay his rent. He's like flunking in school. And like, there's like a scene where like he comes home after like going to like his Aunt May's like birthday, and like everyone's there. His best friend is kind of like looking at him like, oh, so Spider-Man killed my dad. Like Mary Jane is like says she just seeing this guy. He finds out Aunt May is like can't pay her bills. Like he comes in, this guy's like hassling him about his rent, and he goes into his one bedroom apartment, not even a bedroom, it's literally just one room, and he sits down and turns on the police scanner, so because he has to like go out and save the day afterwards. And it's like, it's the perfect, you don't know what people are going through. Like, here's this guy who can save people in a building fire, but he can't even like pay his rent. I absolutely love it. And it's the definition of like, do what you want to do versus do what you have to do. And I love that tension. I love that level of storytelling. And I feel like the only Spider-Man, there hasn't been a Spider-Man film that's done that since. They have tackled and touched on those themes before, but it hasn't been touched on quite in the same way of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And the scene where he saves Mary Jane and tells her that Spider-Man will always have enemies, so you and I can never be. And then he lowers her down into the arms of the man that she's gonna marry. This dude literally gave up the love of his life because he knew he had a job to do. And he watched her hug this man, and he put on his mask and he flies away. And then he's sitting in his house on the day of her wedding, and there she is. There she is. And she says, "Isn't it about time someone has saved your life?" And then I'm sorry. I'm like, I love this movie so much. And then she goes, but we'll say something like, "Here I am standing in your doorway. I've always been standing in your doorway." And they kiss, and then they hear the sirens, and he looks at her because he knows. And she's like, "Hey, I'm here." And she says the iconic line, "Go get him, Tiger." And he, I'm sorry. No,
I love your enthusiasm for it. I mean, you know that I'm not a big fan of the Raimi trilogy, but I can respect, especially the storytelling. Like, for me, it was never that it wasn't a good story. For me, I had other issues with it, and I think that Raimi is a great storyteller. And the man knows how to, put pacing together. That so much of it was done so well. I don't have the same love, but I can totally respect where you're coming from.
Oh yeah, I'm done like trying to convince people that it's the greatest one of all time. Like, this is just therapeutic for me because like I literally say this to myself in the mirror, like by myself. So this is just me just showing like unabashed
sometimes you got to get that off your chest. Absolutely,
just got to get it off. Okay, so
recap. Give me top 5. What was it again?
Sorry. So top 5. So number 5 is X-Men 2.
Okay.
Number 4, Avengers: Infinity War.
Okay.
Number 3, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Number 4, Spider-Man 2. My God. And then number one Marvel film is Logan. It's Logan. It has to be Logan. The pacing.
I knew it. I knew we
the
were going
tone, the characters, the acting, the script, the everything, the ending, just from beginning to end. I would argue it's the perfect superhero film. That movie, like, I can say that it probably like changed my life. Like,
oh yeah, no, I thought I had a sneaking suspicion that we were gonna have the same number one because I think that one of the first things we bonded over was our love for Logan. This movie is it's a fucking masterpiece. And I tolerate no Logan slander ever. Even when people are like, oh, well, like the clone of Wolverine was lame, it was stupid. First of all, no, it made perfect sense for the story for him to be like his greatest like the battle that he would have to fight is the version of the worst version of what he could have been. Like for Logan's character, it makes absolute sense that he would have to stare into the face what he was intended to be and what he could have been, but what he didn't let them turn him into.
Exactly.
I just, and that, yeah, everything about that movie, from all of the like metaphor and allegory and like forewarning and parallels of our own world, all of the rich character development that we get from Logan himself, Patrick Stewart in that movie.
My God.
Oh my God. Like that's literally like the performance of his lifetime in my opinion, in that movie. He does not
He got snubbed. Like
he really did. Playing Charles as like a dementia riddled, like one of the most powerful beings in the universe that's not able to control his mind, which is essentially a weapon of mass destruction. Like, oh my God. I could go on about that movie forever. I love it. Sorry, I just stomped on your
number one. No, you didn't stop it. I was done. Like you gave away your number one, and I'm excited to see the rest of your list.
That talking about that movie is like catnip to me. I'm just like,
this is how we bonded. And we're doing it again.
It's just the best.
This is our thing. This is our thing.
It completely
Logan is our thing.
We are officially a Logan appreciation podcast. Thank you for subscribing.
Some will call us a cult, but I would say yes, we are.
I worship at the church of Hugh Jackman honestly, I was a hater initially. I was like, Hugh Jackman, he doesn't look like Logan at all when they initially cast him. And I was relatively young too, but still, I was like, I watched the X-Men cartoons and I was like,
he doesn't look like that.
I don't know about that, man. But
he's too handsome.
He really turned me around on that one because he is Wolverine.
He's the number one point I make when I tell people about like comic book accuracy doesn't always matter when adapting it into a film. It doesn't, because Hugh Jackman
absolutely
he's ground zero for that.
All right, on that note, I guess I'll give my top five.
Let's hear it.
So we have two in common. So my number 5 spot is actually Thor Ragnarok. Which I'm in the middle of my MCU rewatch right now, and I don't know if these rankings are going to change. But this was my previous like number 1 slot, and I love this movie. I love everything about this movie. It's so fun and so funny, and I love Taika Waititi.
Right.
Loki's one of my all-time favorite characters in the MCU, and so is Thor. And it's just it's got Jeff Goldblum in it. It's perfect. Tessa Thompson, everything. I love it.
You get the best version of every character.
Exactly. But I do think that like I had ranked it really highly before, and I anticipate in my upcoming MCU ranking that it won't be number 1, just because it doesn't quite have like the emotional levels that I personally would want to get to. Right. And I say a lot of the time that my favorite MCU movies are the ones that just like appreciate fun and embrace that it doesn't have to be serious. But I watched another movie recently that hit me harder than I remembered. So I will get into that. My number 4 slot is Into the Spider-Verse, which I also perfection. I love that movie so much. Everything about it, everything you said is just so spot on. It's incredible, especially as a lover of animation. It's visually so stunning. I can't talk enough about how much I love this movie.
Did it take you a while to get used to the animation when you first watched it, being an animation like
it fan? Didn't. I like almost all forms of animation. The only kind of animation I don't really like is like Flash, 2D Flash animation. And mainly it's just because most of the time it's done very cheaply and it's not done well. I have seen like Flash animation that's done well, but it's rare. But yeah, no, I love traditional animation. One of my favorites is stop motion. And I liked the inventive approach that they took to Into the Spider-Verse with the stylistic choices. Okay. My number 3 is Days of Future Past, which I know you touched on. I have big love for this movie. I think it's I don't have a lot of MCU movies in my top list, and I hate making lists in general. Anybody who follows me knows that I hate making lists. Just because I think that there are so many great. God, my cat is being really annoying. I'm sorry if that's annoying everyone as much as it's annoying.
I'm not being annoying. I love cats.
She's started yowling. She's old and confused. But Days of Future Past, like to me, I compare it to like Infinity War a lot when I try and like place it. And I think that Infinity War is a great film, but I just think that Days of Future Past has this really emotional core to it that's tethered not just by Logan, but also like throughout the X-Men movies. I think that the best characters that are developed are Logan and Charles and Eric. I think that's pretty accepted.
Yes.
And this, I know that like the changes to the comics, some people didn't love that they, changed it from a Kitty Pryde narrative, but Logan had been the center of these films, and it makes sense for it to be a continuation of his narrative. And it just works so well. Like, and it's the best version of Mystique. I'm not a big fan of Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, but this movie allowed her to be like a truer version of the character.
That was the last time she was like a good Mystique. Like that was like, I think she also felt like that was like supposed to be her last performance. It was either that for the next movie, and she just put everything into it, and then everything else just never reached that level of performance from her.
But yeah, I think it's so beautiful. I think that it's also really fun and exciting. And as a lover of X-Men comics, it just felt like the opening sequence with the battle scene, everything felt very outlandish and like a little bit far-fetched concept-wise. And I'm like, yeah, it's based on X-Men comics. So that like people were like, oh, how can all of a sudden Kitty Pryde's powers work that way? I'm like, yeah, I know it doesn't make sense, but like you have a little bit of suspension of disbelief, in my opinion, especially for this. But so that's my number 3, and in my opinion, one of the greatest, my favorite like action superhero movies ever. Like I just think it's very epic in its scale.
Also emotionally as well, like the fact that you kill off like some of your favorites like in the beginning, like you're just like it's kind of scary. Like the Sentinels in that movie are terrifying.
They are, and that opening sequence always gets me, like always. It's really heartbreaking. And I am actually somewhat controversial. People always ask me if I like the Rogue cut. I prefer the theatrical release. I do like the Rogue cut, but I think that they were right, because I do think that it detracts from the narrative a little bit too much.
Yes, I agree.
The pacing is just better without it.
It's like the Snyder cut. It's like, it's nice to have, but you're like, I can do without.
Yeah. And that, I mean, honestly though, is I have a lot of very, very good and official opinions as to why I like Days of Future Past the best, but also that fucking Quicksilver scene. It's, I know there was a debate as to which is better a while ago on TikTok, the Nightcrawler scene from X2 or the Quicksilver scene from Days of Future Past. And I love the Nightcrawler scene, but I am firmly in the Quicksilver camp on this one.
It's so hard for me.
I love that scene.
It's such a great scene. It's
so good.
The only thing that can like stop me from loving that scene is like the whole, again, this is for suspension of disbelief, but it's like the music like thing. Like how's the music? Like that's the only thing that like where like the Nightcrawler scene doesn't really have like a flaw like that. But if you look at them both in a vacuum and just like watch them side by side, it's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell.
Well, and the nice thing about that scene and the character of Quicksilver in the Fox movies in general is that he breaks up the tension, because Days of Future Past actually is a very like bleak, emotionally weighty film. And like right before that scene, Eric and Charles are like really about to get into it. Like these two characters at this point like despise each other. And then, we get that like heavy emotional, and like Eric's about to murder some people. And then Quicksilver's like, no, I got this. And also everybody enjoy, because this is going to be the highlight of your
It's going to be a show.
Exactly. I love it so much. If anything, that movie could have more Quicksilver, but I love that they kept it short and sweet and effective. Because I'm not a big fan of the later X-Men movies. And I know a lot of people talk about the Sweet Dreams scene that he does in Apocalypse. But it's just a repeat. It's not as good or effective to me. I think they took a one-trick pony and said, hey, let's see if we can make more money off of this.
Yeah, I did like in Dark Phoenix, they tried to have him do it again. And then like, she just said, fuck, no, it was Apocalypse. He tried to do it again. He was like, fuck that. Stop that.
That's the appropriate. Yeah. I mean, because like we get it. It's a shtick, but like, Right. But yeah, my number 2 spot, and I don't know if this is going to hold up because I'm in the middle of the MC rewatch and I just watched this last night, but my number 2 slot goes to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
It's always ranked really highly for me, but watching it again last night, it might be my favorite MCU movie. Like, everybody says that, oh, don't blame Zack Snyder for the movies because DC rushed everything and he didn't have any time to introduce these characters. And that is, that's a fair thing to say. It's really hard to make an effective team up movie, especially when you don't have characters that anybody has any kind of attachment to. But
James
it's
Gunn
not impossible. And James Gunn did the fucking thing. Like,
you gotta look at Jay like, he did it.
Exactly. Don't compare him to Joss Whedon. Don't compare it to Avengers, whatever. Yeah, that was good. But James Gunn took characters that didn't even have any social currency in like the social, like the zeitgeist. Nobody, Guardians of the Galaxy as characters were not on anybody's radar. Nobody was giving them the benefit.
Who they were.
Exactly. And then he made this movie that is fun and exciting and incredibly paced, but also it brings together this team. You buy that they're in it together. You buy their emotional connection. And every single character in that movie has like a full emotional arc from start to finish. Like you get a semi-origin story for Peter Quill. You understand why he is the way he is. You get Gamora and her relationship with Nebula is introduced. And they even get to have like that battle that's like really emotional.
Yes.
Groot and Rocket and their relationship and Groot's sacrifice that literally every time makes me cry. Every time. Even Drax, like facing his like thinking like, oh, I'm going to call Ronan because he took my family from me. And then learning that like he needs this new family that he's found, not just to help him defeat his enemy, but because he's missing something in his heart. And it just, I mean, they literally saved the galaxy with the power of friendship. And I'm sorry, but that is all I need from a superhero movie.
They literally held hands to save the universe.
It's like the Pixar movie of the MCU. And
that's the best description.
I just love it. So yeah,
I will say Drax has never been better than he was in that movie. Like not only was he funny, but he was dangerous, and he had a lot of like a lot of subtext to the character.
Yes,
and I feel like in later movies he was just like the joke character.
Yeah, he completely was. And I gotta say too, what is the actor's name who plays Drax?
Dave Bautista.
Yeah. Dave Bautista is such a fucking incredible actor. Like you've seen Blade Runner 2049?
Oh, I have not yet.
What? Okay, this is going to be a point of contention for us because that's one of my all-time favorite movies.
I know it is. I just haven't. I don't have the time. I hear it's long.
It is really long. Yeah. But no, he's got range. Like literally, this guy came out of nowhere, and he's got some serious acting range. I mean, I would not be surprised to see his career like absolutely take off because he's wildly talented.
I made a video about him because somebody asked me about like I was doing this video about like charismatic actors versus like character actors and like dramatic actor and whatever, and I made the point that The Rock falls into like the category of like charismatic actor. Like he's very entertaining, and it's like he gets by on like his charisma and his personality, where it's like you don't really see a change in a lot of his characters. And then somebody brought up the fact that Batista is also a wrestler turned actor. What do I feel about him? And I say, when you're comparing like the two, Dave Bautista in his short amount of work has proven that he is a much capable actor, like capital A actor than The Rock is. Like, and I saw the clip of 24 of him in 2049.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I was like, this is his only scene? They were like, that's all he has. I'm like, are you sure he's not the star?
Yeah. Well, and like The Rock is someone who like he's good in films, but he's not a chameleon. He's always going to be The Rock in every role he takes, and
which
he
isn't
does
a problem.
It well. Yeah, absolutely. And there's tons of actors like that didn't even come from wrestling. Like no shade to that at all. But then there's yep. But then there are actors who just like can do literally anything, and I am shocked that Dave Bautista is one of those actors, but I am here for it.
Totally here for it.
All right, so let's do DC. What are your top 5 DC films?
DC. Are you ready? All right.
Oh wait, I forgot. My number 1 is also Logan. That was I had said 4, but I already went on about Logan. So yeah.
Would you like to explain? I think we like both like gushed about that. Film. All right, so top 5 DC, and honestly, like I don't know, like I know like my top 2 orders, but I think everything else is like no particular order. So my top one is The Dark Knight. I feel like, I feel like it has to be number one. Like,
Yeah.
I've always said that Logan and The Dark Knight are like competing for like best superhero film of all time. And that's just how I feel about that. Like, we could talk about like Christopher Nolan's direction. I feel like after The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan has just kind of been, you know, just kind of capture that magic again. I just felt like that. Like, Inception is the closest to it, but like I really didn't feel the same weight as in like Interstellar or especially not in a Tenet. Like I just didn't feel anything when I watched Tenet, to be honest.
I
But
haven't even seen it yet, but yeah, I've heard.
yeah, it's just him going like, yeah, I'm the best. But I'm like, I'm not sure you are, dude. That's me the whole movie. Like, I'm not sure you're the best that as good as you think you are. But he's great. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm just like watching it, just like, yeah, it's all right. But The Dark Knight, number one, and then my number two, and people will probably like come at me for this, but I honestly think this is like one of the more underrated DC films, and it's Man of Steel. I actually truly really enjoy Man of Steel. The only thing that's like wrong with that movie, well, admittedly, there's a couple things wrong with that movie. One being like Lois Lane's character use, like they don't know what to do with her there. And then it's the last final fight scene. It's entertaining as all hell, but I feel like it was over the top. Everything else though, like what the movie was trying to do was ground Superman in a way that a lot of like comics, shows, and movies have failed to do during that time. Like even in the Richard Donner Superman, you felt that there was this like otherworldly like being like trying to be a regular guy. Whereas like in Man of Steel, you felt that he was a regular guy who had godly powers. And like the whole like him trying to hide that and him deciding if he should reveal himself to the world, like what, like the true like thing of what would happen if somebody like this existed on our planet. What would, not only like how would we react to it, but how would they respond like to like, the scrutiny, the attention, the repercussions of it. Do they allow people to die in order to keep that secret? Because if he did reveal himself like in a big way during like the whole bus scene, something much worse could have happened to him, his family, those kids, whatever. So I actually really really like Man of Steel. Now that I'm talking about it, it might not be my number two, so let's just say number one is my for sure like lock. So but yeah, then I would say like number three, Flashpoint, the Flashpoint Paradox, the DC animated film. I feel like that I watched a lot of like and DC animated films, and I honestly was fighting between Flashpoint and Under the Red Hood, because I think Under the Red Hood is like an amazing,
Under the Red
like
Hood is outstanding.
It's so great. It's almost damn near perfect. But I feel like I like Flashpoint a lot because it's a cool like standalone story that you feel, that you actually feel that you've like watched other DC animated films. Like obviously you have like Cyborg, you have Batman, you have like all these other characters. But even if you was to watch this movie and you had no idea who any of these characters were, you can still enjoy like the relationships, the story, like the fact that Aquaman is going to war with Wonder Woman, and the fact that that something is wrong here, that's like really cool. And like the story is just packed with like moment after moment after moment of just like crazy like shit, like Lex Luthor being capped by Aquaman on a boat. Like it's there's just so much to love in that film. And again, Flashpoint is very much like the X2 Days of Future Past debate with me. Like every day those two change for my favorite like the animated film.
I got big love for Jason Todd, so like
I've been trying to get my wife to watch Red Hood forever because she's like in love with like anti-heroes, and I just know Jason Todd will be like her favorite character of all time. I introduced her to Deadpool and she's like obsessed with him, so I'm like, you need to watch like, Under the Red Hood. Like she just keeps like ghosting me on it. I don't know why. but then number four, number four, the original Tim Burton Batman. The original Tim Burton Batman. It's great. It's a great like reintroduction to the Batman character. It's like it definitely takes the cues from like Batman's like revamp in I believe it was like the 80s, where they started to transition him into a much like darker, like grittier character that like separates himself from the rest of the Justice League. Because before that, he was very like, he was part of the Super Friends. He was a super friend like type of Batman, where now he's like the super bad boy, where like they look at Batman and there's like, I'm kind of scared of that guy, So like I like that one. And Michael Keaton just does like an incredible job. Jack Nicholson's Joker, incredible. Like just everything about that movie, like it's A1. And then And then my final one, and this will be super controversial, but I'm only putting this here because I felt like this revealed what DC could be like going forward. And that's the Snyder Cut. The Snyder Cut for me is not a perfect film. It's super fucking long, too much damn slow-mo. It's overindulgent. Some like again, don't know what to do with Lois Lane. Like there's just like a bunch of things happening that like I get why people would like not want to either see it again or like will say it's not a great movie. I know you said it's not good objectively. Not even gonna argue with it. Not even gonna argue with it. But the way there are certain characters and certain scenes handled and like just the scope of like that is what that movie to me perfectly captures what we were talking about at the top of the episode of like DC is literally like a story of gods being people.
Yeah, it's mythic. It's
mythic. And I got the mythic like story from the Snyder cut that I did not get in the 2017 cut. Like the fact that every character like is like they get a scene to prove like why they deserve to be on the Justice League, like Cyborg being someone who could literally like change the course of the world with like a flip of a switch, like the scene where he's like gives the woman like all that money, like super emotional. So I think that could be a movie all by itself. And sucks that we will never get a Cyborg movie with Ray Fisher. Hopefully we do. The Flash scene where he like the beautiful Flash scene where he like reverses time and like, you know, the whole like, oh, Barry, you got to break the rule. You got to do it now. And you just felt like just him saying that you felt that he didn't want to do it. You felt that before he struggled with like breaking that rule. You just in those small moments, you get windows into like how big these characters are and just like how important these characters are, not only to their world, but to this universe. And
I really think, and I know that I came for the throat of the Snyder Cut. I know, but I really think that there is a version, an edit of that film with the raw footage that is magnificent. I really do think that Snyder is his own greatest enemy and gets in his own way. And if he had, it's like George Lucas, you know, if he had someone like George Lucas's ex-wife, Marsha, to be that voice of reason, that, you know, literal person in the editing room, to say this can go, this should change, then that film really, I do think, because I think that I didn't dislike the theory or the concepts. For me, it was, you know, the gratuitous usage of, you know, stylistic choices and long shots and, you know, trying to be more emotional just based on the idea that this is moody, you know, but I'm
convinced he was touching himself during the filming.
I mean, and those things are not necessarily inherently like indicative of a bad story. It's just those are he makes a lot of stylistic choices that to me take me out of the experience and, you know, seem a little more self-serving than audience serving. But I completely respect that there are fans of his style, and there's also fans just of the characters that appreciate finally getting to see these characters handled with the respect that they deserve. And I think that Snyder really did something for fans of DC characters that I think everybody can appreciate.
Absolutely. Like I agree with everything you said, like every last thing you said. I just really love I just want people to like look at the Snyder Cut and say like, this is what we can do with like DC heroes, because the problem with the original Justice League was like, and this was like the mandate was like, we want to be more like Marvel. So let's add some more jokes. Let's like make it more lighthearted. Let's even have the final like fight scene be like bright red instead of like this dark, dreary like hellscape.
Yeah. Joss Whedon will put that snark into fucking everything. He writes all of his characters the same way.
And I'm like, bro, like that's why you were chosen for the Avengers. Like, but like DC, like you can have lighthearted stuff. Like, I mean, we have Shazam, we have, you know, Aquaman, all that stuff. But when it comes to like facing off against like Darkseid and like actually gathering the Justice League, like Justice League handles big shit. Like I do believe that Justice League, if they were like to get into like a fight with the Avengers will get fucked. Like they will get wrecked because it's not even a contest. And I know Stan Lee said like, oh, whoever wins, it depends on the writer. Like, nah, the way you set up the way these characters are set up in a vacuum, it's not even a contest. So like, you know, I like, we can get into this another day, but like just like comparing like, oh, how the Avengers took out like the Chitauri and like how like they were flying by the seat of their pants. They were just like, oh, let's
Yeah,
some blocks
absolutely.
here. Let's do some blocks here. No, Flash reversed fucking time. like Flash reversed fucking right. The fucking cyborg literally got into like an alien piece of tech that like destroyed a millennia long like sentient three mother boxes. Like, come on, like it's not even a contest. So I just think like moving forward, I really want to see DC heroes like kind of like corner that market of the superhero genre. Like we have dark and gritty films, we have anti-hero films like Deadpool, we have fun, lighthearted, snarky MCU films, but I feel like cut out all the gratuitous stuff, cut out the weird lady singing Celtic Iceland songs
Yes,
and sniffing
please.
Aquaman's shirt, cut out all that shit and just like focus on like these characters, like these character moments and like just focus on that, and then I think
Yes.
DC will actually be in a great position to really take on Marvel.
And I would love that. Like literally, I'm a huge mythology nut. I love Norse mythology and Greek mythology, and I would love to see more like the themes that Snyder explored with the Snyder Cut were really cool. Just like
Mm-hmm.
that really fits into my interests personally. So I would love to see them do that more. I think that they definitely need to kind of I've never thought that Snyder was a great director, mainly just because I think that he put style over substance. But I also think that
Right,
that's not necessarily a fault of his because he's also not the sole writer. I think he mainly does like story by
right.
credits for these. Like he's not even like if they had gotten him a decent script and they had a good editor,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it wouldn't even be Snyder's fault because he's a director at the end of the day, not an
Mm-hmm.
auteur, not somebody who's doing
Right,
everything. You
right.
know,
And wasn't he? Didn't he start off like as a cinematographer as well? Like that was like his
I think
first.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I think like his the way I get the vibe that I get from Zach is like he's a cinematographer first love, and then
Yeah.
like he always loved like making movies and stories and things of that sort. But I feel like I get the vibe that like he really started to want to create his own films because like he was a cinematographer and thinking like, oh, I can make that look cool, I can make that look
Yeah.
cool, and he just gets wrapped up into making it look cool that he just kind of like when it comes to story he over like plays everything else. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's the person who like writes but doesn't edit themselves, and they
Yeah.
make a
Exactly.
100-page paper instead of the 10-page paper that was assigned.
Yeah. Yeah. And people do kind of like they assign credit where credit not isn't necessarily due with filmmaking because it's a very collaborative process. And with
Right.
someone like Zack Snyder, like I think that there's the tendency to compare him to directors who write and direct, and Snyder doesn't typically do that. So like if somebody like I am not a Zack Snyder fan, and a lot of the problems that I have with his films aren't even necessarily like his choices because he
Yeah.
didn't write the script. And that's I could people like myself who are critics could be more clear about like where our issues lie. But I
Mhm.
also think that even when people praise films, like it's like, oh well, we just have a tendency to put all of this weight onto the director role
Yeah, it's not
when they're
just
like a
him.
project supervisor when it comes down to it. Like a lot
Mhm.
of it's one of the biggest problems I have with James Cameron is him trying to take like being like, oh, Avatar is brilliant. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's brilliant because you had a team of 500 animators creating this world that you had
They're the
nothing to do
heroes.
with.
They're the heroes. You just come in and be
Exactly.
like, I love it. Let's give them
Exactly.
more of this. Let's give them more of that. But these are the people that actually put in the work that like
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
make it work.
And yeah, so I'm generally speaking, I wish that more love was spread around the film industry to people other than directors.
Yeah.
But that also goes for blame, and people like me could do better at being like, it's not all Zack Snyder's fault.
Before,
I feel the same way about George Lucas.
no, exactly. It's like people give like all this praise to like, oh yeah, Steven Spielberg, like I love the music. Like, oh well, John Williams also had a major
Music can
influence
really, yeah. I
music, and
mean,
then I feel like with music John Williams is like sometimes he can overshadow a director in my eyes, and
yeah.
then same thing with Roger Deakins as a cinematographer,
Oh
like his
yeah.
cinematography sometimes I just watch the movie because of his cinematography and I forget who the director is. So
Yep. Okay. All right. So my top DC films. I'm gonna start with number 5 and work my way up.
mhm,
So fifth place goes to Wonder Woman, which
nice.
I love that film. I was not a particular fan of Wonder Woman before the film, and like literally, I that film I cried like 3 times.
Beautiful.
The first scene where the Amazons are fighting on the beach,
Mm.
like it's just overwhelming. Like that scene really, the whole film really just captured a strength that hasn't really been shown for female characters.
Right.
It was like the opposite of the male gaze. It was just very much like, because so many fight scenes that women are in are just very, even the way, like the choreography for Black Widow's fight scenes, she's always got her legs around somebody's
She's always
neck.
scissoring someone.
Like it's very, and a lot of times it looks cool, but it always seems like the first intention of the choreography is to make them look hot, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, but like Wonder Woman, all of these women were just strong. They were strong beyond belief. And it was a kind of strength that I'd never like felt was represented for women before. And yeah, it was just, I am very, very in love with Diana Prince. I talk about it a lot. She is my wife, and I love her. So as a character, yeah, she's amazing, and that's all I could.
We agree on that.
I could go on, but I will not.
Your husband's like,
yeah, we can't. We don't like to watch that movie together. And the thing is, it's not even Gal Gadot that I'm like. She's beautiful, but I'm so in love with Diana Prince as a character.
Diana Prince as a character is just I have a thing for Mara. I have a thing for Mara in all media. Mara is just my
Mara, and she's got that like sass to her as well, which I really appreciate.
If I was to marry any fictional character, Mara would be my first choice for sure.
Yeah, that's a very good choice. So my number 4 is Batman Returns. It's interesting that you like Tim Burton's Batman because I prefer Batman Returns. I'm a huge fan of Batman Returns. I like Batman too. But this film, I mean, Keaton is just an amazing Batman, and Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in this movie, like this performance is so much fun and so incredible. I am obsessed with her. This was the main reason why I was not really excited about Anne Hathaway taking on the role. And in the end, I changed my mind about that because she did a great job.
Yeah. And
it had to be a completely different interpretation because you can't compete. There's no competing with that performance.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But I love Batman Returns. I love that it's kind of a Christmas movie. I don't know. I subliminally, I always associate Batman with Christmas. I think that like Batman the Animated Series had a lot of Christmas episodes, and it's always snowy in Gotham. So like I always in Gotham,
yeah. Didn't his parents die in the snow?
Almost
during Christmas.
I think almost every interpretation has like blood on the snow.
Yeah. See.
But yeah,
Batman's about Christmas, guys.
Exactly. Secretly, yeah, undertones. But yeah, so that's a funny parallel. And then my number 3 is, I feel like I've got controversial picks for the opposite reason as you. My number 3 is Birds of Prey. And I know that a lot of people don't like that movie. I absolutely love this film. I think it's so incredible. I think that there's some valid criticisms, like the fact that Cassandra Cain.
Oh my God, they ruined her.
Yeah. And I just think it could have been as simple as having her be an unknown character, just having her be a kid, and then the movie would be fine. But I made my peace with it because also, like, I think that if one of your favorite movies is X2, Rogue in that movie, I just had to let it go.
Yes.
I just had to say,
let it go.
She's not the Rogue from the comics. That's just the line that I have to draw in the sand to watch those movies.
Unfortunately, she's not the Rogue from the comics.
Yeah. Wouldn't that have been amazing?
I like Birds of Prey though. I saw it as DC's. I saw it as like DC's legit like Deadpool.
And that's exactly what it is. Like she's an unreliable. Like people love to come at it and say like, oh, it doesn't make sense for her to be able to take down these goons, and this doesn't make narrative sense. Of course, it doesn't make narrative sense.
It never did.
She's an unreliable narrator telling the story from memory. She's gonna be telling the story in a way that flatters herself, and also Harley Quinn as a character is just bonkers.
Yeah.
And half the reason why she wins is because she does something that is so stupid that no one would think that she would do that. But she's like, yeah, they'll never expect this, so I'll do it, and maybe I'll win.
How many times have we seen Harley Quinn in any like form of any medium, like video games, comics, whatever, win with that goddamn mallet? Like,
exactly.
Against super powerful people. She always does. So seeing her do it in the film, I'm like, that's actually kind of perfect. Like it makes sense.
And that's exactly my thing is people love Harley Quinn from the comics, but they literally just made Harley Quinn from the comics in the film, and then people want to say that it's unrealistic, and I'm just like, well, I mean, all of this is. Like, it's not, I don't understand why. But I think that the movie is so much fun. I think that it was exactly what I needed as a woman who happens to be a comic book fan and who loves these characters. All of them I thought were awesome. Black Canary in that movie is so incredible.
Of Black Canary. Huntress, to go with your point, like the unreliable narrator standpoint, like Huntress in the comics is nothing like that. But if you look at it from the perspective of this is Harley Quinn's like interpretation, like her memory of her is like this super hard ass like person who's like, oh, I'm not angry. Like that's like that. It makes perfect sense why she would be that way.
Exactly. And also that most of these characters would not be at their most charismatic around Harley Quinn because Harley Quinn annoys the shit out of people.
Exactly.
So like it just like it's like every interaction with Deadpool is people being like rolling their eyes at Deadpool because he's annoying. Harley Quinn is the same way.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's so much fun and I love it. The fight scenes are choreographed so beautifully.
Love it. Love it at the carnival.
Being in the prison with the sprinklers. Every single time it gives me chills. Every time. I love it so much.
Visuals too
yes.
are amazing.
Yeah, Kathy Yan. I'm really looking forward to Kathy Yan's career, the director of that film. She knocked it out of the park with that one.
Killed it.
And my number 2 is also The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight is really good. I know that a lot of people have like turned in their perception of Nolan's Batmans, but I just think that Batman movies are always going to be a little bit different. And when you get a director like Christopher Nolan, just like Zack Snyder, like I don't like Zack Snyder's version of Batman. I don't think he should use guns. But a lot of people are able to say, well, this is his interpretation. This is how it is. It's different for him. And I think that Nolan was always going to do a more grounded. I mean, it's Christopher Nolan.
Of course.
He's very nobody wants Christopher Nolan to do Christopher Nolan's thing more than Christopher Nolan. So he was always going to make it his own. But objectively, it is entertaining as hell. It's paced amazingly. Heath Ledger, still to this day, one of the most hauntingly incredible comic book performances ever.
He's better than Joaquin. I've made. He's better than Joaquin.
For sure, absolutely, yeah.
And like you said, Christopher Nolan, like we knew it was going to be grounded. Like he somehow managed to make a dream within a dream feel like the realest shit like ever. So you don't know what you're getting out of Christopher Nolan. Maybe you should.
And do I think that The Dark Knight is the best Batman story ever told? No. But do I think that it is one of the greatest movies based around this idea? Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. The only gripe I really have with it is like with Batman is like his character of Batman is that his fight choreography isn't necessarily the best. While in the Cape and Cowl anyway, because I think like they handled it a lot better out of the cowl because you have to see like faces and choreograph that, but everything else it's kind of rough when you go.
And I actually love Batman Begins too. Like Batman Begins would be high on my list of DC films because I think that it's underappreciated. I think that it's actually great. I'm not the biggest fan of The Dark Knight Returns, but
no, me neither. Oh, you mean Rises? Like Rises?
Oh yeah, Rises. Yeah.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. Like
it was okay.
People say, "Oh, it was the best." No, it actually is.
Yeah.
Like that, but mind you, that's just our opinion, guys. Like, don't come.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just when you really think about that movie, nothing really makes sense at all. Nothing.
It doesn't. It really,
When people bring up plot, I think people throw around plot hole very loosely, but Dark Knight Rises is the epitome of like a plot hole movie. Like, the only thing it really like nails for me is just like, there's just the weight of the ending, just like the ending, like, he's done, like, he's out there with Catwoman, or is he? Like, Alfred finally got like his vacation, just little stuff like that. But everything else, I'm like, you fly from a hole in the middle of the ground all the way across the world with no resources, and the first thing you do is put the bat signal on the side of a building. Like, how did you do that? Like, how'd you have the time? You send all your police force into the sewer.
Oh my god, yeah.
You sent everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but like the thing with Robin was also, I was just like,
don't get me started. Don't get me started. Well, people, he could have been Robin. I'm like, that's an Easter egg. Like, he would not fight crime with his actual name.
Exactly. It's really clever. It's my middle name, so they'll never figure it out.
Oh my god, that always irked me. And also, it came out literally, I think, like in the same year as like the Avengers. So this is like around the time where everyone thought that superhero movies are going to connect. So when that movie ended, they were like, "Oh, so they're
We're
going to
gonna
be
get a
next one with
Robin movie.
Like, no, like
Yeah.
you realize this trilogy started in 2005. The MCU didn't really start until 2008, and even then, they didn't know if they were going to do anything. So it's
Yeah.
just I can go on about that. We're like
No,
literally
it's yeah. And I mean, and that's the thing is I can ultimately that's why The Dark Knight is my number 2, because I can really appreciate what Nolan did. And as a film lover, and I know that this is your perspective too, because obviously you're the movie guy. And I think that a lot of comic book Batman fans, that's why they get hung up on The Dark Knight, because they want it so specifically to line up with the character from the comics. But I think that you and I both share this idea that
right.
as a film lover, typically when I'm watching a film, is this a good film first? Is it a good adaptation second? That's my kind of
yes.
That's my
absolutely.
kind of bar.
Absolutely.
But that being said, it is not my number 1 because you cannot, in my opinion, tell a better Batman story than The Mask of the Phantasm. That is my number 1 DC film slot. And I think it's kind of not fair because as much as I love Mask of the Phantasm, to me, Mask of the Phantasm is like the culmination of everything that I love about Batman the Animated Series, which is one of my all-time favorite DC properties to have ever existed.
Right.
And Mask of the Phantasm to me just really felt like if I could smush all of Batman the Animated Series into one movie. And yeah, it's just I love it so much. Mark Hamill's Joker is still one of my absolute favorite interpretations of the character. And I love the Bruce Wayne from the animated series and Mask of the Phantasm.
I think that's definitive Bruce. I think everyone's been trying to be that Bruce since like the animated series.
And no one's been able to come close to that level of Bruce.
They used him in the game, right? Bruce,
I think they did. Yeah. I think that they did use the same actor.
They have to.
Yeah.
They also used Mark Hamill as well, too, right?
They did. Yeah, they couldn't get the same actress for Harley. Maybe they did the same actress for Harley Quinn for the first game, but they had to change it. I can't remember exactly what happened. But
Tara Strong voices Harley Quinn. Am I right?
That sounds right. I'm not sure if she was the first actress.
I'm looking it up right now. Keep going. I'm gonna look it up.
But that's I mean, actually, to your point, Batman the Animated Series is probably my favorite version of Bruce Wayne that we've ever gotten, and a close second would be the Bruce Wayne from the Arkham video games, because that Bruce felt the most true to Batman the Animated Series. And I love that character. I love those games so much, except for what the fuck is the one called? Arkham, I think it's Arkham Knight was the one that had the Batmobile that I just couldn't fucking figure out, and I hate it because it really disrupted gameplay for me. But Arkham Asylum and Arkham City were both just so good.
Somebody I think it was my brother, he downloaded the one with the Batmobile, and I remember like it made me not want to play Batman games because that
Batmobile was the worst. Yeah. And at the time, my other friends who were gamers made fun of me relentlessly. They were like, "You can't figure it out. That's so lame." And then now that I'm older, I posted about it on TikTok a few times, and people were like, "Oh no, everybody hated that game because the Batmobile was so annoying." And I was like, I feel so vindicated.
You just have shitty friends.
I did. I had a bunch of pretentious gamer asshole friends apparently who were like, "Oh, it's not that hard. Just figure it out." And it probably isn't that hard, but it was too complicated for me to make it enjoyable. So
it was complicated for me because this was like literally my first Batman game that I was playing, and like to start off with something when I play a game and it just starts off really difficult for me, I'm just no. Like I like it, as much as a Marvel fan as I am, I went out and bought Marvel vs. Capcom 3, played online, literally like never won a match online, got whooped repeatedly, never got a hit off. I returned that game within a week. I was like, if I can't even win one, there's no, like, I'm done. Like, so no.
This is why I had to stop playing Call of Duty online, because people are just, first of all,
too good.
Freaking PC gamers with their goddamn mouse that they can just hover. I mean, it's a headshot every time. Okay. That's not even fair.
It's so hard on a controller to headshot. I don't know how people do it. Like, it's so damn hard.
And PC gamers are like, "Well, just get a PC." Okay, buddy.
My best friend says the same thing, bro. Just get PC. Shut up. Like, I love consoles. Okay,
exactly.
Leave me alone.
I want a PlayStation. That's why I play on a PlayStation, because I want one.
All right. So since we're winding down now, let's
Yes.
wrap it up. Like, give me like a sentence or two. Do you think DC will ever catch up to Marvel, and why or how?
I think that in terms of like this cinematic universe idea, they're playing a losing game right now
Mm-hmm.
because they're not they're not focused, and that's the biggest problem. Is they keep trying to play catch up, but if they would take a second to stop running and sit and put a game plan together, then I think that they could. I think there's a lot that they've already created that could actually be salvageable for an interconnected universe. And I also think that it is kind of silly for them to kind of exactly replicate what Marvel is doing, because they can create an extended universe that doesn't have to directly tie into each other with every film. Every film doesn't
Right.
have to be a continuation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that they, with Shazam and Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman and even like Aquaman, which I just thought was okay, but still decent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they have these characters and these narratives that can conceivably, believably exist in the same universe. And I think that if they just spend some more time making stories like that, instead of trying to build to something to catch up to Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
then they could do something really great. I'm really excited for the Suicide Squad movie. I think that
Yeah.
that's exactly the kind of project that they need to be focusing on.
Mhm.
That just makes people fall in love with the characters first, and then 2, 3, 5 years down the line, if they want to try and do a team up movie with characters that they've already established, I think that that'll be a lot more likable, because they
Right.
don't have like a schedule. Like Marvel has this like laid out schedule of
Mm-hmm.
release dates and interconnected shit, and DC, they don't make nearly as many movies as Marvel, so they're never
Right.
going to have that same volume. So yeah, I just think that if they stopped looking at it like a race, if they for
Mm-hmm.
a second gathered themselves and said, hey, let's just make some movies about these characters that people like, then it would come organically. And I
Right.
hope that they're making that realization, like with James Gunn's Suicide Squad coming out, with the decisions that they're making more recently. I think that there's a lot of hope for that.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Like I'm pretty much gonna say the same thing that you said. It's like there, when people always like, you see the TikToks and these inspirational like Instagram videos of people saying like, it's not a race, man. Like some people like, get rich at 20, some people get rich at 50. Like everybody's like on their own path. Like I don't know why movie studios just forget that completely. Like
Yeah,
just work at your own pace. Nobody's
exactly.
clocking you. Nobody is clocking you. Like there's
Yeah,
nobody like looking, oh, they haven't done a team up. Marvel's already done 3 team ups by now. Like that's because that's what Marvel can do. That like that's Marvel's
exactly.
thing. Like I feel like if they just exactly like you said, like I would love just to have like individual movies. I don't even want to know if they're connected. I don't even want to like go in like thinking, oh, what's going to happen in the next movie? Because I feel like that is one of the flaws that Marvel has. Is like it's hard
Yeah,
to focus on the one thing because you're always looking ahead to the next, which is
absolutely.
what happened with WandaVision, right? Like throughout that whole
Absolutely.
thing, they're just like, oh yeah, so this Mephisto, like it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
X-Men. And mind you, we were part of it too, but
Yeah. We
but
get
but
caught up.
we get caught up, but Marvel has like set a precedent for that because they're too busy setting up other things in their current things. So
Yes.
it's like it's that relationship between Marvel and the fans that I feel like DC shouldn't shy away from by just focusing on like these singular storytelling, like singular stories. Like I would love to just see like I'm excited for the Batman because it seems very standalone-ish.
Yes.
And like
Yeah.
if he is part of the new DC universe and that's just very standalone, that's really cool because you could just set up Gotham and like the Batman mythos, and then somewhere over here you can go to Central City, and then you're doing the Flash, and like you can flesh out
Yeah.
his mythos and his story and his city and his characters,
Exactly.
and then Superman, you go to Metropolis, you go to Smallville, you can do that, and then you have way down the line you can have like little team ups here, maybe just say, oh, there's a big threat, like let's have like a crossover where like, oh, let's go, like let's have Flash like, oh, I'm gonna go to Gotham really quick, and then you could see the difference in like tones like kind of meshing,
Yes.
so I really hope that they would do that and just kind of like just take their time instead of just like being in this like, I don't know, it just kind of feels like the race to space except with movies, which is way lower stakes, but it's
Yeah. Well,
just
and I
guys,
mean,
just do your thing.
People think that I'm such a Marvel fan, but actually when I was initially on TikTok, like I caught a lot of heat for not being the biggest fan of the MCU because I think that the MCU is they're efficient. Like literally and I think that people like MCU fans can get a little bit too caught up in like the MCU supremacy, like the idea that like, oh, everything they do is good. Like I mean, you're kind of comparing the MCU to like McDonald's when you do that. Like, yeah, they can consistently put out a good product that everybody knows what they're getting into when they go in, but McDonald's isn't, you know, it's not winning any awards for originality, you know,
right.
And I mean, I think that the MCU, I can generally trust that going into an MCU film, I'm gonna enjoy it and have a good time. Is it going to go down in history as one of my favorite films? Probably not. Is it going to be something that I'm thinking about for 3 hours afterwards? Probably not. But like, I mean, unless I'm thinking about like, you know, Easter eggs for the future or trying to speculate what their next steps are going to be. It's not like and some of their projects are more nuanced than others, but I do think that like the MCU deserves a fair amount of criticism for being formulaic and you know, and that's not to say again that it is bad. They know they're trying to make money and they're trying to get what they want, and that's what they're doing. Yeah. But that's why I hate this whole idea that there should be like a feud between like DC fans and Marvel fans, and one is objectively better. Like they're both doing things. I wish that DC would quit trying to directly compete with Marvel because I think that that is their downfall. But when they don't, like I like Birds of Prey better than more than half of the MCU films. Like I think that you can appreciate, you don't have to say, oh, well, Marvel is objectively better every time. I like all Marvel films better than all DC films. Like, I don't know why.
That's that what do you call it? Like the hive mind type shit. Like that's, I don't like that. Like, cause anytime you criticize like a Marvel film, then the people, I hate the argument, like it's better than DC though. It's like, dude, you can criticize the film, you can recognize like I kind of, when Martin Scorsese came out with his like, oh, the Marvel film, those Marvel films are like they're not cinema, they're he would describe them as like roller coasters, and like I honestly will say he's not wrong. Like he's like, cinema is subjective, yes, and like blockbusters, by his logic, Jaws is not cinema, Star Wars is not cinema, like E.T. is not cinema, you know.
And I think that Scorsese really needs a bit of a reality check on his own relevance.
He does. I think he's stuff
around like that. But
I'm just saying, Irishman was too damn long too. Couldn't finish
just
it.
Because something is pretentious doesn't mean it's good, Scorsese.
Exactly. I'm just saying, man. Come on, Marty. By his logic, Marty McFly.
Maybe if Leonardo DiCaprio told him that, he would believe it. I don't know.
Probably. I don't know. It's just, you know, so like, but in a sense, he is kind of right, because what the MCU does is, like you said, it's very formulaic. Yes. Like there's a lot of movies where you walk out and you just don't think anything about, like for instance, Incredible Hulk. You walk out, like you're not gonna think about that a year from now. Like you're not gonna think of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 from like a couple years. You're not gonna think of Ant-Man and the Wasp a couple years from now. Doctor Strange, like the list goes on. But it's just where was I going with this? Oh yeah, but like there's very like some superhero movies, like the only superhero films that I feel transcend the superhero genre is like Captain America the Winter Soldier, Black Panther, and that does it strictly on its themes. I feel like the third act went right back into the superhero formulaic stuff, and that's kind of what ruined its perfect score for me. But very seldom does a Marvel MCU film like transcend its genre, and there's nothing wrong with not trying to transcend the genre. I'm not expecting an Oscar winner in like a rom-com, you know, like most rom-coms, you know, you can get one, but I'm not expecting it. So to say like, so when people like make you just because it's not winning any Oscars, like I'm not expecting it to. Like it's playing in a sandbox. I'm criticizing it by the sandbox that it's playing in. Yeah. Does it live up to the sandbox? And if it like transcends the sandbox in a way, if it goes to the beach, that's when I'm like, okay, that's a great. Dude, I'm not surprised by that metaphor I just made.
I love it. I love it.
You know,
I'm gonna use that. We're just from now on. Did it go to the beach? Because I didn't get to the beach. I had that same, that was my same criticism about the ending of WandaVision. And people were so quick to say, oh, well, it's just because your theories weren't right or this and that. And it's like, no. My issue was that it had the opportunity to transcend. It was so close. And the final act was just, it went too much back to, it was too much of a correction back to form. Like
Yeah.
it really started out and said, hey, we're going to do something different. We're going to commit to this completely different format, this non-linear storytelling. We're going to do this like really out there thing. And then I just felt like the ending just missed the mark a little bit, because instead of focusing on the emotional growth, which we got a little bit of, and that scene was really beautiful.
Yeah.
The majority of the final act was, you know, a smash them up, you know,
they're flying and throwing beams of light at each other.
Yeah. And I wish that they're, you know, Wanda and Vision had been separated for the past several episodes. I wanted to see more of the weight of that loss. And I think that, again, people have been asking me to rank it recently, give it an official ranking. It's still like a very high score for me. Like, I still think it was great, but was it able to transcend? I don't think so, because the last act took me out of it just a little bit.
Same.
But I still think it was an excellent project. And I think that Marvel does that a lot, where it's like, they are great. They touch on emotion. It's the formula. They make sure to hit you with the comedy and the emotional weight and the action and the great pacing and the great production. And then sometimes it's a little too formulaic is really the best word I have for it.
You just made me realize that, storytelling wise, like WandaVision is very much like Black Panther.
Yes.
Like, it does a great job from act 1 to 2 and a little bit into 3, like tackling these themes of like WandaVision in their case, like, you know, grief, like isolation, like those type of things. But then you get in Black Panther, you know, prejudice and class and responsibility, you know, just like neo Afrocentrism, I think is the word. But then like you get to the last act and you feel like to wrap it up, you have to have like, oh, bad guy fights. Not only that, like bad guy with similar power set fights good guy with similar power set, and big like final battle with CGI and stuff like that. And it's disappointing because it could be more, but you know, it seems like I don't know if Marvel's like learning from that. It seems from Falcon and the Winter Soldier they're learning from that.
Yeah,
but we'll see. We'll see. Like I feel
I mean, I think that they're definitely learning. I think DC is learning in the problems that they have to address as well. Like, I think that neither of these properties or production companies are perfect or put out perfect products. And no matter which one you prefer, like, they've all got pros and cons. Really, I just want all of us nerds to get along, you know?
Exactly, guys. Can we just like stop fighting over Marvel versus DC? Like, let's have like the who would win superhero battles, yada. That's all fun, but we're not better than each other. We're all literally sitting doing the same thing. It's just a different book. It's just a different book and a different. That's all it is.
Yes.
Like, sometimes like I look at people sideways when like they mistake like Justice League members for Avengers members sometimes, because like for us it's like what. But I on a small level, like I envy them, because it's like, yeah, you don't know, which means like you don't think you're better than anyone else. You're literally, they're all the same to you. So like, let's just treat them as one thing, which is they're comics, they're superheroes. Let's just love that.
Yes, I did get called a huge nerd one time because some friends of mine dressed up as Captain America and Wonder Woman as a couple's costume. And I was like, you guys, like, right? Thank you. Thank you. I was like, this isn't you guys. And they were like, oh my God, you're such a nerd. Nobody cares. I was like, I mean, this is pretty bad.
This is pretty egregious. Like, even for a casual, this is pretty.
Right. Oh my God.
The amount of like where did you read that Captain America and Wonder Woman were together in the first place? I
couldn't handle it.
This had to take planning. Like this, not only did this had to take planning. You both sat down and said, we could be a superhero couple, and you just went to the store and just picked any old costume and wore it.
Yep. That's
bad.
My brain was crying that
that's
day.
Bad.
And nobody cared.
That's bad. I would have cried with you, because that's bad. Like,
yes. Thank you. I'm glad that I told you about that, because I've been holding on to this for like 8 years, and
they just get it out. Just get it out.
It was very cathartic for me.
That's horrible. Like, oh my gosh. I'm just like, I'm gonna be thinking about that for like till next week's episode. I'm gonna be like,
It was bad. It was like,
are you still in contact with them?
Not really. No.
Okay.
I mean, they very frequently, like, jokingly were like, "You're such a nerd." It was funny too because it was like literally right before like nerd culture went mainstream and like the MCU films. So like this was the group that I saw Iron Man with, the first Iron Man, and I was like going out of my mind afterwards. I was like, I can't believe it, and this has such big implications, and they were like, oh my god, like it's not that big of a deal.
It's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
Little did
I'm gonna go find some new friends. You guys have a nice life.
and you did
exactly.
It's bigger, but guys, this is bigger than you guys think. Like
exactly,
we take this shit seriously.
At least now I get to. I was right.
Ha. You were right. And now look at you. You're on a podcast with hundreds of thousands of followers, and you're like literally listening to these type of things. Who will look at them and say, "Yep, you're wrong." No, I wonder if they're
basically still, they can eat it.
They can eat it exactly. I'll say you can eat it. Look at us now. Oh, that's funny. All right, so I think that just about does it for our show. There's a lot of time there, and I'm happy with what we got. This is gonna be a monster to edit, but I'm super excited because like I actually do like listen to our podcast as well. I don't know if other like podcasters do that, but like I actually listen to us.
I had to listen to episode 0. I was so jazzed. I mean, it is. I mean, I think. You know, I like talking about this stuff, and I also like especially because in the moment talking to you, like we have to think about what we're gonna say and talk about this stuff, and then like getting to experience it again, like just be able to relax is also
exactly just
nice way.
Just be a third party, just like sideline ourselves and just sit back and listen. So I'm like,
it's like looking at a picture. This was a nice memory. This was a nice conversation.
Exactly. Okay, so now I don't feel as weird because like I don't want to feel like conceited. Like, I'm listening to my podcast. You should listen to my podcast that I'm listening to. Right? I have a good podcast for you to listen to. It's me.
I mean, we are awesome. And that's really the takeaway that you should have from this podcast.
So much hubris from the both of us right now. Exactly. So much.
If anything, we are very humble.
We are very humble. We are two humble individuals, two humble nerds who can tell other people that their Halloween costumes suck.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've both been humbled enough in our lives.
Yeah.
We can take some power back. This is our power. This is cool.
Somebody's gonna knock us down eventually. So let's just
probably for me tomorrow on the internet.
There's people typing right now like you got this wrong. But cool. I think that's our show. Like Stoobs, let us know where we can find you.
I am, I'm all over TikTok sometimes, and then it's just Jstoobs. I just got a Twitter today. I made a Twitter.
Today? Oh yeah. Wait, somebody tagged you.
Yes. So that was an account that it was like inactive because I realized that the name changed, and then I logged on because somebody tagged me. I didn't have any followers, and I was like, because someone tagged me, I got 60 followers that I've never.
There you go.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I guess I'll do it. So now I have a Twitter. It's the Jstoobs because Twitter's been around a long time, so I can't get that handle. And Instagram and TikTok. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Also, the Geeks of the Week podcast that you're listening to right now.
Yeah, the Geeks of the Week. Find us at the Geeks of the Week. We premiere every week. We launch an episode every Thursday with new geek content about comics, movies, TV, all that stuff. You can also find me, Straw Hat Goofy, aka Juju, or the other way around. You can switch it, vice versa, however you want to do it. You can find me as Straw Hat Goofy. That's straw_hat_goofy on TikTok and Twitter. Yes, I also have a Twitter. I forget all the time that I have a Twitter until somebody tags me. You can find me on Twitter on that. And then for some reason, my Instagram is Straw Hat Movies because my personal account is Straw Hat Goofy. So you can also follow me with the same underscores, Straw Hat Movies on Instagram as well. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to Geeks of the Week, episode 1. We'll see you guys next week with some more Marvel versus DC with some special guests. We're going to surprise you with those guests, but it's going to be another great and most likely long episode of us geeking out about these type of things. I am not ashamed. Oh, also check out my merch. You can find the merch in the links in my bios on TikTok and Instagram. So if you guys want yourselves a Goofy Vibes only mug or a t-shirt or hoodie or leggings or stickers, then you can get them there on Teespring.
Does it say Goofy Vibes only on the butt on the leggings?
On the legging? No. Here's the thing. My friend who designed all the merch, she actually brought that up. Like, hey, how do you feel about like your name, like on the back? We're like, you mean on someone's butt? And she's like, yeah. I was like, I'm married, and I don't want to like. I don't know why. I just don't want people to think like, oh, yeah, he puts his name on girls' butts. Like,
I
it
mean,
just
I do wonder what the implications would be as a woman, what people would interpret if they saw goofy vibes only on your butt. Like, is there an innuendo there? I don't know.
I don't even want to leave it to interpretation. Like I'm trying to be a good guy, and I don't even want people to suspect like, oh, he makes merch to put his name on girls' butts. So
that's totally fair.
yeah, so it's on their thigh. No, I think it's on the calf. I tried to keep it as PG as possible when it comes to like
that's very, the calf is a very respectable.
It's a very respectable.
Only Puritans from 400 years ago would be scandalized by that. Is it objectification or is it appreciation?
It's I would say appreciation. I would say appreciation.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I did choose the least objectified part of the leg. So
definitely.
I don't
Calves
think
are
they're
underappreciated.
Exactly.
They need more love. They need a little bit of attention.
Exactly. See, love to the calves. But all right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you guys next week.